All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this would be update number 10, I think. Yeah, that would be. I think this would be the 10th update. Yeah, the 10th Malison update. A little bit more to. Well, I guess it's probably not going to be much longer than last week. It might even be shorter. There's a little bit more. I've been really getting back into the swing of things now for Malison. But most of the work last week was really on two things, and I'm gonna show little bits of the first thing. Yeah, most of the work last week was really on Chapter 2's little candle maker, the cursed candle maker quest. I spent maybe 3.5 days, maybe more, 2.5 days, just on finishing up the candle maker. We got there's some new enemies for it. There's these. Oh wait, let me show this real quick. So I'm just going to show real quick that area. I'm not going to go too much into detail because I don't want to spoil too heavily during these updates. But let's just warp to here. This here right there is in Chapter 2. And one of the side quests here that has been sort of half done for a long time. I finally decided to actually work on it now and finish this up. Now, it's not fully finished. There's still one big detail left to do on it. But, it's this whole thing about a candle maker. And I'll just skip through things here a little bit. But the candle maker's basement is now a proper little dungeon filled with candle wax and monsters attacking. And the monsters now have they have these little candles, and those candles represent their mana, and when they run out of mana, the candle goes out. And it all leads up to, and there's a little puzzle here. It's not really like a puzzle, but it's mostly there. And it gets more and more filled. There's several rooms here. I'm just kind of skipping through quickly here. These monsters kind of pop in. And in the end, there's this boss, which is just this candle man just covered in fire. And now all the candles here represent, again, the mana he has left to attack you with. Still a few little visual details I want to fix here. I want to make the candle monsters sort of more smoothly transition into the ground. So I'll need to tweak the sprites here a little bit. And there's also that the final reward isn't completely done yet, so I'm just going to cheat here to kill him. And you get this special skull item out of it. This special wax skull that you can actually equip to just about anyone. Doesn't have a name right now. It's probably going to be the wax skull. And it's an offhand item that you can use to cast certain fire spells. And this is actually a way you can give fire spells to just about anyone, even non-wizards or anything like that. It uses your confidence to cast the spell, like most of these evocable items do. And there's two general... There's two uses for it. You can actually just keep that skull to cast fire spells with, which is very useful. Or you can use that skull to actually get a new party member. But if you do that, that actually uses up the skull. It's gone. So kind of a fun little decision there at the end. You kind of choose between two possible rewards for the quest. There's also another item you get by exploring this. There is this fire poker here. I'm just going to get it here. Yeah, there is this poker. It's just a very heavy rapier, basically, that does fire damage. But as you use it, it's loses its heat over time as it loses durability. So by the time it's half broken, it's no longer hot. So at this point, it loses its fire damage. So it only temporarily gives you fire damage, which I think is kind of fun. Basically, just a little temporary addition of fire damage, which can be pretty useful to clear out this dungeon, but also a little useful for the next chapter too. Gives you just a little bit of help at the start of it. So yeah, that is the stuff for this quest. Now this quest is almost done. The big stuff left to do is just a little bit of the polish, which I'll do on my off time. And also, the party member that joins you isn't quite done yet, but mostly done. All the assets for the party members are there. Just need to actually script it in and do some of the actual event for recruiting that party member. So there's some stuff left to do here, but, this is Gare. You have a very limited ability to only repair some weapons. Most weapons you're probably not going to repair in this. This is more the kind of game where you just have to replace weapons as they break. It's kind of meant to be, that's kind of like the survival horror thing. You're kind of meant to be sort of low on resources and to be sort of like, deciding your decision of whether to use your best weapons or not are kind of like a key part of the game's balance in resources. Which still needs a lot of work, especially right now in Chapter 2. The resource balance is really off. You get way too much stuff right now. So it doesn't really feel like you have to make decisions right now. It just feels like you just have so much crap. It's a bit of a problem. So Chapter 1 is a lot better, though. Chapter 1 actually I feel like it's very close to being right. All right, and the other thing that I worked on, so the other thing I spent some time on last week, and I'll be continuing a little bit next week, but I don't want to work only on that next week. I want to set just a little bit of time every week aside to work on this, is working on the big dungeon of Chapter 2. So Chapter 2 has a big dungeon, the Alchemist's Laboratory, which I can show a little bit of too as well. These color monsters. That's right. The Alchemist's Laboratory is this big. It is the game's big, like, first massive sort of dungeon. There's a few dungeons before that. A lot of them are optional, and and they tend to be kind of on the short side. This is the first, like, really meaty dungeon that, like, it feels like it's a whole little journey with more than one boss in it and all that, right? So that's the first, like, really, really meaty dungeon. And I'm really not satisfied with it right now. At its current state, the current state of that dungeon, I feel, is just not there yet. Right now, it feels like a chore to play through. It doesn't feel exciting. I feel like I've identified some of the reasons why. So let's just warp to that. Just to show a little bit of that that dungeon as it is now. So let's warp just in front of the Alchemist's Lab. That's the dungeon. I think, it is open. Good. So this is the entrance of the Alchemist's Lab. Now, for context, one big issue with this dungeon is that it is at the end of a long, kind of grueling exploration of a place that already kind of feels like a dungeon. And because of that, the Alchemist's Lab feels a bit too much like it's just a continuation of that dungeon. And because of that, and they share a lot of enemies, there's a lot of things in common, visually speaking, between the two and all that. And I feel like that's a big part of what makes it feel like a chore, is that it's just too similar to the thing you just did. And the enemies also feel like they're too similar. And that just makes the whole thing feel really slow. It feels like, oh, wait, there's still more of that? I thought I was done, right? So I've been working on some ideas to try to mix things up a bit. So I thought at first that this was okay, that this was different enough, because it feels a lot less the Alchemist Lab feels a lot less like it's just a maze, like the previous area. It's not really just a maze, the one before, but it's more like of a puzzle thing. You have this first one here. You have these sort of light puzzles where you have to cause tanks like this to blow up, and there's some you know, it's a little bit more of a puzzly kind of area as a dungeon, especially the start of it. There's like these different things, like there's a lever here that cuts the gas in the front and turns it back on behind, which again, it's not really exactly a puzzle. That's more like a setup for mechanics that actually do become a puzzle later. Like above, it's actually a bit more of a puzzle. You get up there, and right now, so the overall plan here, the overall goal is basically to get this tank here to blow up, and in order for that to happen, you need to fill that tank with the contents of a bunch of tanks nearby in that same room. There's a tank down there, and so that's like the goal here, is to just fill this up so it blows up and lets you go through and proceed to the next phase of the dungeon. And like you see, you know, there's these goopy monsters all over here. Once you get past this, downstairs, there's just more of those monsters. Like this here is like this guy here. These monsters like that. Pitchman. These monsters are like the standard monster of the entire chapter. And the fact that it's still them... Oh, there's some slightly glitchy tiles here, but that's fine. So yeah, these monsters are like the standard monsters of this whole chapter. Like, you've been fighting these exact monsters for a while already, and the fact that it's still these guys in the dungeon feels wrong. It feels like this is just, you know, it feels tedious, you know? It feels like at this point you should have moved forward. There's some, like, I mean, there's some stuff like, you know, there's some monsters that are escalations from previous ones, like this thing here, which... It's kind of weird that it's not fighting me, but... So, like, this guy is like an escalation from a previous monster, but it still feels like it's the same type, right? You know, you fought things like this before, but this one is more extreme a bit. And it's stuff like that, and, you know, like, that kind of works, but it's just not exciting enough. You need something more new than this. And also, visually speaking, yeah, no, it's all very one note. It's very one note. So, the improvements I wanted to bring to this whole dungeon here is first to just add a lot more variety to the enemies you encounter here, and to also do a little bit of a facelift to the game, to the dungeon's looks in general. I wanted to feel, because right now, okay, it feels like, I mean, you know, there's these giant tubes, and, you know, there's some wiring, and there's some kind of vaguely technological stuff going on. And here, like, the look of those green walls, that's, you know, that's pretty different, visually speaking, from the rest, so that's nice. But it doesn't feel like an alchemy lab, you know? It doesn't yet feel like this. I want it to feel like a dense, detailed maze of, you know, like test tubes and, you know, boiling vats, and, you know, I want it to feel more dense than this. I want it to feel less clean. And so, yeah, I want to give a little more of a facelift to this. I want more density of detail in this place. I want it to feel like a dump a bit more, too. It's too clean. I mean, there's already stuff for this, like the tiles that has, like, you know, piles of paper and stuff like this. So that was already part of the tiles. Just need to add a little bit more. Yeah, cool alchemy stuff, cool chemistry stuff, vats, glass tubes, dripping fluids all over, explosive stuff, acid stuff. You know, I want that more. I want a bunch of, like, jars filled with weird things inside. You can't quite tell what it is. All of that. Also, another thing is the dungeon right now has a little bit of a narrative through it, but it's a little bit flatly... It's told in a kind of flat way where you just kind of collect these bits of paper that are like notes, and, like, it's, you know, there's these... It's all very indirect. It's lacking an actual character to talk to for most of it, you know? And that feels a little disappointing too. Like, there's these research reports about this, and if you read all of that, you get a bit more of an idea of what's happened here and why this whole thing has happened to this part of the city and all this. And, like, that's fun, that's okay, but if a character could bring that instead, that would be way better, right? If a character could give you the same information, it could be just as informative but more entertaining and have like oh, thanks for subscribing, Rolex. It could be just as informative but have character to it, have like a whole presentation to it, like have it like the character could be just fun to interact with and all that. So yeah, that's a few things I want to change about it, and one of the things I want to change is introducing these monsters. So the idea of these monsters is, so basically all these gray goop monsters, let's see, there should be one here. So all these monsters here that are kind of a little one note, there are these gray goo, right? All these gray goop-like monsters that are like fused together like this. Those are fun. I like their concepts and all that. But the idea would be that these would be like the first round of tests that the alchemist made, right? This is like the first like failed experiment, right? And those are the ones that escaped the lab because they've been around for longer, right? And so that's why when you go around, most of what you see is this gray goo that's filling everywhere. But once you get inside the map, that's when you'll find, the other experiments that she's done since. And that's where these come in. These are going to be her other failures that happened later. And so I'm making these different sort of... Now, the entire theme of these monsters is a failed attempt at making a regeneration potion. She was trying to make this potion that would heal any wounds. If you're missing a limb, if you're missing anything, if you're, of a disease of some kind, you just drink this and you're all good. You just grow anything you lost back. You lose anything that was wrong with you, right? It's just the cure-all, right? And it horribly backfires, and it turns everyone who drinks it into a horrible goo person. They all lose their bones, everything. They just become horrible goo. They lose their mind. It's not good. And this would be her other attempts at this. These are all sort of based on the idea that something is growing too much, right? So this one is like just skin. This one is just like pus and stomach acid, and this one is just growing heads and blood. The idea of this one is that it would be like leaking upwards, but everything leaking upwards turns into a head. This one is just growing hair and nails uncontrollably. This one is growing bones. Just the bones just poke out through the skin, while the skin sort of stays normal, This one's just growing guts, entrails, just uncontrollably. This one isn't. This one I drew before I was thinking of it as just uncontrollably growing. But, I can, so, this is just a weird outcome. Who knows what's growing here, This one, brain. I guess nervous system growing uncontrollably. This one, limbs. Look at this fucking guy. And this one, its entire tongue and entrails just poured out of its mouth and turned into like a kind of snake tongue thing. Of all like So, these are a bit more fun as monsters go. The first four are like, they're based on like the four humors. That wasn't actually initially the idea. At first I was just putting together like a bunch of colors just to have monsters that have very different base colors. And then I think it was Garju that suggested to do something about the humors. And then I thought, well, I could take like 4 of the monsters and make those the main ones. And the others would maybe be like more specific cases, right? So like these would be sort of the 4 main attempts that failed, right? And then the others would be like sort of further experiments on those main 4. And the idea here would be that you would have 4 potions that correspond, 1 potion that corresponds to each. That is sort of like basically the thing that caused this, right? And the idea is that if you throw like the green flask to the yellow monster, something would happen, right? Like each combination of one of these monsters with one of the potions would do something different. And the idea is that the combat would kind of gain this sort of slight puzzle element to it, but it would still be combat. You could just fight them normally. But if you learn about what happens if you throw, if you throw the green potion at this one, some of them might get stronger, and you would find, you could find information on experiments that the alchemist made to predict what to do. And I would also make some like smaller versions of these. These would be like the bosses. These would be kind of like the bosses you encounter for each humor. And there would be like smaller, weaker versions of these that would be sort of more the typical monsters. And each sections of the lab would be sort of focused on one of them. And yeah, I thought that would already help quite a bit in making the old Alchemy lab just feel a bit more fresh after this whole section of the game you went through where all the monsters are these gray goop creatures, This, I think, is going to really help to just really kick things up a notch for the lab. The gray goo is still probably going to be there, but it's going to be just a little bit, downplayed to give room to these guys. So I'm thinking these are going to be unique fights. All of these are going to be unique fights, really. And there's going to be like subversions of a few of them. So like all these 4 here would probably have like smaller, weaker versions. Maybe some of the others would have weaker versions too, but yeah. But yeah, that's the general gist of it. Also, another thing, I was talking about interacting with a character to just give a bit more, just give a bit more of a social encounter, I guess, to this dungeon, and it would be this little guy, which I just made like 2 attempts at a sketch so far. This would be an homunculi that the alchemist made as a helper. That right now definitely has a sluggy vibe. This would be an homunculi that you can rescue, or you can like either repair or something really early on in the dungeon, that would act as a character to speak to, at least to give a little bit more of a variation on the kinds of encounters in the dungeon, just so you have. It would probably have some, maybe a little side quest for you, maybe some of the stuff that I tell you through the documents you find would instead be told to you through that little guy, because that's just more fun to have a character tell you things instead of just reading. Maybe the documents are going to stay exactly as is, but parts of what those documents tell you are going to also be told by that little homunculi. Because then, that gives you 2 different chances to learn these things, and it's a bit more fun, adds a bit more personality to it all. I'm not yet sure where I'm going to when I'm going to put the homunculi, but I'm thinking somewhere kind of central. So maybe on this floor here somewhere, there could be like, the broken homunculi on the floor, or maybe strapped to a chair with some part of it missing, and you maybe have to do something to bring it back. Maybe it's like unable to move. Maybe it's just a flask. Maybe it's just gonna be a flask, and you need to find it a body, or something. Something like that. Like you have to do something for it, to sort of get access to all the information. Oh, there's actually another thing too. There's this guy here. This is Gregory. This is another of the failed experiments, and it's tied to the homunculi here. Gregory here is arguably the closest thing to a success for this whole thing of trying to make an ultimate regeneration potion. It's not actually a success, because Gregory is really in a fate worse than death here. But Gregory absolutely cannot die. You chop him up, and he just, all of the parts you chop up, individually spring back to life and grows like a body. So Gregory is very much immortal, or very close to it, at least. And the idea here is that Gregory was made entirely by mistake because the homunculi messed up something. The homunculi makes a mistake and accidentally almost succeeds where the alchemist failed. And the alchemist is very angry at that, especially that the homunculi can't actually reproduce it. And this is probably why she basically broke him out of frustration or pettiness. So that's also going to be part of that little story. So yeah, that's the idea. That's the gist of the idea for improving the alchemy lab. I think that's going to be good. I think that's going to be what the alchemy lab needs. Just a bit more color, a bit more personality, a bit more variation to the kinds of encounters and gameplay in the lab. Make it just a bit less one note. Yeah. I'm pretty happy with that plan. We'll see where it goes. Like I said, I don't want to focus entirely on that next week. I'm just gonna set a little bit of time aside on it, maybe 1 or 2 days a week or something. I'll add to it because I don't want to focus too much on it. I do want to, because I'm not supposed really to be working on the main dungeon here. I'm supposed to be working on the side quests. This is what this milestone is for. It's just that, revisiting Chapter 2, the Chapter 2 dungeon really feels like it's the biggest sort of problem it has right now. It's not quite there yet. It needs that extra love, I think. And I think this is going to do a good job of it. But yeah. So yeah, that's going to be, what's coming up next week that's it. I'm going to be working on a little bit on this, maybe on 1 or 2 of the days next week. I'll be just continuing to work on this a bit. I'll probably be making the smaller versions of these guys and work a little bit on actually implementing them, and also work on revisiting the layout of the dungeon and plan a little bit what to do exactly, where to place each of those experiments and the information about them, and also how the flasks that you can find, those flasks that are going to be associated with each of these. There's going to be a green, a yellow, a red, and a black flask. I'll need to figure out what exactly they do. And also maybe what happens if you drink them. I think it's probably going to be implied that a single flask isn't enough to give you this horrible fate, because that would be way too complicated to figure out how to actually make that work. But it's probably going to give you some kind of disease that are diseases that are themed after these. And, probably that the implication would be those potions would turn you into this if you were infused with it for a week or something, right? This is the ultimate result of these potions if taken regularly, right? So that I don't need to make it that it's actually like this. It's more it's just going to give you a really nasty disease, a really nasty, long-term status effect that you need to visit a priest to get rid of or something. If I even need to, I could also very much make it that those potions are really just thrown weapons that you can't, you can't actually drink them. You can just throw them as a weapon, because that is their intended purpose anyway. And it is actually kind of tricky with how the game works right now to have an item that you can both use on yourself and throw at enemies. The way it works right now, the only way it could work is if you could throw it at enemies and if you could throw it on yourself. You can't make it a different action. You can make that if you use it on yourself, it's drinking, and if you use it on enemy, it's throwing. The game isn't really built that way right now. But that's a minor issue. But I could just make it you can only throw it on enemies. It's not, it's very obviously a bad idea to drink it, right? It's literally just a random, spooky, boiling bottle of toxic goo found in a mad alchemist's lab. You're not gonna drink it. But yeah. So yeah, that should be fun. And also, I'm gonna be working on one other thing next week, another quest, and I haven't actually decided on which one I'll focus on next, but I'm thinking it could be in the Magpies Dagger. I can show that right now, actually. The Magpies Dagger is the first sort of friendly location of Chapter 2. The Magpies Dagger is this little restaurant. Also, the tiles here. This is also another thing that's going to be updated soon. The look of this street here. Obviously, this is still sketchy. So that's going to be a thing to update. But yeah, this here is the Magpies Dagger, a little restaurant that is actually a front for a Thieves Guild. And so working on this is kind of the prelude to working on the Thieves Guild at last, which the Thieves Guild is probably the biggest chunk of unfinished content in Chapter 2. So that's a little daunting to get into, but I need to get into it. And the Magpies Dagger's main quest right now would be speaking to Grant over here. So Grant, sells you some stuff, and you can also get a job from Grant. And if you take jobs from Grant, that is one way to eventually end up in the Thieves Guild, right? And so if you do some odd jobs for Grant, eventually some stuff leads you to the Thieves Guild. And in doing so, you also end up working with the cook of the Magpies Dagger. This gentleman here, Hobbs, who can actually join your party. Hobbs is a contract killer. He's a contract killer. He's an assassin who's decided to stop being an assassin, and had enough of that kind of life and sort of started a new life as a cook. And that's Hobbs. And the concept of this party member is, if he joins your party, he joins as a cook, but you can tempt him to sort of become an assassin again. And if you do, the idea is that you would change radically as a character, like going back to that old life, but it's really bad for him, right? So it's like the good ending somehow for him is really if he can remain useful enough as a cook in your party and doesn't actually have to go back to his old life that he left behind, right? So that's Hobbs. He should be pretty fun. But yes, so I think what I could start working on next week, as far as the side quests are concerned, is the Magpie's Dagger sort of introductory quests that eventually lead to joining the Thieves Guild. The Thieves Guild is in the basement, of course. You go in the basement here, and there's a little secret wall that leads down there, and eventually, this here is a kind of a guard for the Thieves Guild. But right now, like I said, the Thieves Guild itself is basically like non-functional right now. Like right now, the whole Thieves Guild is just a bunch of characters that sell you things, and they actually attack you if you're not a member but you're inside. You enter. If you join but you're not a member, they treat you as like an enemy. So these are all NPCs, but they become encounters, like enemy encounters. They become enemy encounters if you're not actually a member of the guild but you enter. They're not quite. These are actually the wrong NPCs. I think these are mutants for some other thing. So I need to switch them. But like I said, it's an unfinished area. So, there's the cultists here. Yeah, it's complicated. Their whole thing is complicated. It's sort of halfway between a thieves guild and a cult. It's like a cult to. It's like a secret cult to a sort of roguish god of crows, Malthus. So that's the Thieves Guild. I'm not going to be getting into the Thieves Guild itself yet. That's for a little bit later. So in the meantime, I'll just be working on the introductory those introductory quests first. It's just going to be some basic. The idea of those quests in the Magpies Dagger is that they're going to be like quests that are ostensibly just little chores, but that imply something sinister, right? Like you're naive. Like you're naively doing some little quests that sort of hint at something sinister. Like you have to take out the trash, but like the trash bags move a bit. You know, that kind of thing. Like you're unwittingly made to get rid of a body. Stuff like that. That's always fun. It's probably going to be like 3 or 4 quests. And they sort of increasingly get more sinister as they go. And the idea is that as, when you do the final one, at this point it's very obvious that this is not just a restaurant. And that's when, it's kind of presumed that if you're still on board, it's because you are guild material, right? So yeah, that's the general gist, and that's what's coming up next week. Also, another little update. So last time I talked a bit about the RPG Maker little side project, the little fun side project that I started over the holidays. And I wanted to finish it in 1 week, but I failed to finish it in 1 week. And now I got to go back to my normal stuff, so I can't dedicate too much time with it. And last week I talked about how I was a little torn on what to do exactly to finish that project, because on one hand, I want to limit how much time I can work on it, because if I don't limit how much time I can work on it, I'll work on it forever. And it's never going to get done because it's just a thing for fun. And when you're drawing weird monsters and putting together a little dungeon, and you have no like limit or end goal, you can just do that forever and just have fun forever. That means no one ever gets to play it. That's not good. On the other hand, though, my initial plan was to just give myself the rest of January to work on it, like on my off time. But that became kind of stressful because I started just putting almost every minute of my free time to work on it. And that sucks. I don't want to do that. And I was a little torn about exactly what to do to both end up with enough time to work on it, but also to be limited in how much time I can work on it. So what I decided, and I think this is a good plan, is to basically dedicate Mondays, not all Mondays, but just Mondays in general, to work on that game. Monday nights, really. And the idea is that every time I spend a Monday night, working on that RPG Maker game, it's going to be to focus on one of the levels. So one of the dungeons, one of the one of the numbered dungeons. There's 10. There's 10 floors. There's 10 major dungeon sections of the game as you go deeper and deeper down towards the final boss that's at the bottom. And yeah, I'm going to spend only one Monday on each. And once I spend a Monday on one of those floors, that locks it in. I cannot spend another Monday on it. So every time I spend a Monday on it, on one of the floors, that locks it in. It's over. I don't touch it anymore. I can playtest it a bit. I can make maybe little tweaks. But once I have spent one Monday on each of these, it's going to be done. That's going to be it. It's all locked in. The game's done, right? So I think that's a good approach because I'm not in a hurry to work on it. I don't need to work on it every Monday. Like last Monday, I didn't work on it. But once I do spend a Monday on something, I cannot go back to it and add more stuff and all that, right? So that means the game can only move forward, and eventually it's going to be done that way. So I think that's a good balance of forcing me to work on it but also limiting how much time I put on it, and also not making me spend way too many hours adding to it because I know there's a deadline coming. I think that's the best approach for this kind of project. That feels right to me. That feels like that's gonna give the best outcome and still actually make a game that eventually people can play, right? So yeah, that's the plan for the the RPG Maker escapade. So yeah, hopefully that results in something good. But yeah, that's gonna be it for the update. Yeah, Monday RPG. That's it. That's the idea. And also, I will do the first Monday on this tomorrow. It is Monday tomorrow. And I will be working on the Spider's Lair. So the Spider's Lair tomorrow gets locked in. That is going to be the one day that I work on it is tomorrow. So if you want to see me make a little village of spider monsters, that's going to be tomorrow on the stream. And yeah, I'll try to actually balance it tomorrow. I'll try to actually, I really want to like finish it so it's all done and I never need to touch it again. Again, now I do want to let some room in for balancing things. Okay, balancing things are still okay because I mean, because that's the one problem with this approach is that it means I work on everything separately. And an RPG is a bunch of levels strung together. And, balancing needs more time than just the kind of thing you can do in a single day, right? So, for balancing, tweaking the enemy stats a bit, maybe adding an extra healing potion here and there, that's still allowed. Just no content, I think of it as a content lock. And also I would say a detail lock too. I don't want to return to detailing the monsters more either. So even if some of the monsters are still kind of sketchy by the end, even if some of the monsters are, and with the spider monsters, that's definitely the case. The spider monsters are pretty sketchy looking. Let me just show you real quick. Also the game has a name, by the way. The game didn't have a name really before. But yeah, these are the spider monsters. Look at them. I'm not sure I'm gonna be adding new monsters to this, but these are the spider monsters. All the inhabitants of that city. There's some basic ones. There's a little spider teacher here, a wise spider, and so these are very sketchy. I'll probably spend some time on Monday on polishing these a little bit, but I don't want to focus on that too much. I want to focus on actually designing the levels, designing the area. So yeah, that's gonna be what I work on tomorrow. That should be fun, and like I said, when I'm done with that area, I am done. I don't want to touch it after that. And probably the next time after that, I'll be working on the next area, which is going to be the underground lake, and so on. Yeah. But yeah, that's it for the update and for what's coming up. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's kind of small. It's one of the simpler areas, but it still got some. It still has some stuff. It's not that empty. It was one of the more simple areas when I initially made it, for sure. But yeah, so that's it.